Thanks, great thanks, Ole-Andreas. And you characterized the presentations of Tone and myself exactly. It is complementary information, and my role is only to give some introductory information about what we are doing. We have launched some months ago a survey on the ECL and other extension-based solutions outside of the Nordic countries. And of course the natural reasons for this were the fact that also Olaf was referring to the model of ECL is has been attracting and is still attracting growing interest in countries outside of the Nordic countries. There are legal questions, as we have heard about it, so the nature needs clarification, and analysis and established opinions shall be established at some instance if there are no such. So that is a process that is going on. And then there is also something that all of you may not know. In the ALAI, Association Littéraire Artistique Internationale, in the roof organization of national copyright societies having a seat in Paris, has also attached interest to the ECL, and already 1.5 years ago launched the project to study the possibilities to use the ECL in cross-border situations, and that was by the subscription of the European Commission, who wanted to know about it and who wanted the quasi-authoritative opinion from the ALAI. And that was done, and there is also an understanding that another opinion of the ALAI will be established in the future, maybe next year, a bit of a more general nature, telling about the conditions on which the ECL may be used on national levels. And this is just to provide information to those who want to have analytic information and correct legal information about the system, how it works, what are the elements of it, and how shall they be looked at legally. And the objectives of this survey is, of course, to confine the denomination of ECL for solutions that are legally binding and fulfill the criteria of what can be called ECL. Other extension-based solutions may be useful as such. They can be called by their names, as Olaf was doing. Where you once, as a legislator, have understood and identified the issue that in the collective licensing there are always persons, works whose authors are not represented by the licensing bodies. There are always non-members, as the German law says, non-represented, as the German law says, even Außenseiters. Then you cannot get out of the trap. You have to find a legal solution, legally binding solution for this. The solutions may be mandatory collective management. They may be outright limitations of rights, as we have heard. They may be indemnity clauses, to which Jan Rosén was referring to, and there may be the extended legal presumption of representation, which are also based on extension. We are trying to get from as many countries as we may to get information on what is the legal model in different countries, which works are covered, which uses are covered. The work will continue, and as you have heard, there is all reason, and the list of countries we are looking at just now is as follows. From many countries we have information that there is a solution based on extension of application of terms or extension of legal the representation. And then we have countries from where we have weak or strong signals that there are considerations on the national level. This is all, as we have seen now in some months with Tone, this is to acquire correct and precise information will take more time, and it will require also a lot of correspondence with people in those respective countries. And this was my introduction to what Tone is going to say, to complement what Olaf was telling to you.
Where do we push here? Which one do we? Which one do we push to?
That one.
That one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I will provide you with a couple of examples of countries that we've heard that Olaf has talked about. We will give some other examples, and we, of course, cannot go through this entire list. Then we would sit here the rest of today and probably tomorrow. So a brief summary, and we will start with some of the countries that you see in the first column here. And first out is nope. Which have you taken the updated one? Okay. I sent you an updated version, so this is not. It doesn't contain my version. I sent you an updated one to your email. There's been a slight mix-up on my behalf. I distributed it to the wrong person, but I will provide you with if we can bring back the list here. And then I will talk from that, and we will distribute the slides that I've made later. They are quite comprehensive, so you can see. Just bring back that one, because it's not here. Just, yeah. So you can have the list of countries at least. That one. Nay! There. Sorry. Okay, so we will start with the Czech Republic, which you can see is a country that has some kind of ECL system. So the Czech Republic has labeled their solution to be an extended collective management solution. And according to Article 97E, a collective rights manager can provide an authorization to exercise rights through collective management. This authorization is granted for management both on basis of a contract and to all those who consider themselves right holders from whom it exercises collective management under this act. So this here, you can see the last part is the extension effect. From the wording of the translations, we have, it's however not clear if this can be seen as the extension derives from the contract or the law, like the distinction that Ole has talked about. So we're still not clear, so this is something that we're looking into to see if it should be seen as a genuine ECL or if it should be seen as a legal presumption of representation. So still work in progress. And in the Czech Republic that we're still on, when it comes to the use, it's quite wide. There will be a list on the slide. But to mention a couple of examples, it's, for instance, phonogram, radio and TV broadcasting, auto commerce works in certain cases, and for some educational purposes. So it's there are several other examples as well. But they're all found in the law listed. Then we will move on to Turkey, which you also find on here, on your left side of the slide. Turkey has a draft to a new Copyright Act that we've gotten our hands on. And the one we have is the second draft. It's from April this year. And they have an article, 42E, which is titled Compulsory Collective Licensing. And interestingly, this article was not in the first draft to a new Copyright Act. So this has come out now in the second draft. So here something has clearly happened in the debate in Turkey. The use for now, as suggested, is for broadcasting and retransmission. And what is the proposed rule? So from the article, it follows that the rights enumerated in this article for compulsory collective licensing for the sectors in which the single collecting society operates shall be managed by that collecting society. So this wording indicates some kind of mandatory collective management. As to the extension effect, according to the draft, the administration of rights for non-members shall be performed by the joint licensing unit that is authorized by the ministry. So we can see that the joint licensing units that they talk about need a mandate, but then the right holders are obliged to let them exercise the rights on their behalf for broadcasting and retransmission in this case. The extension is therefore a mandatory collective license. The law also points out that there shall be no discrimination between the members and the non-members of the CMO, or the joint licensing unit, as they call them. Interestingly, the draft also considers cross-border situations where there are cooperation agreements. And in this case is the principle of reciprocity that applies. And this could be quite handy for Turkey when you consider that it's a very big language, which you find in many countries, and it's also native to several countries. And it also shows that Turkey has considered for which situation this kind of mandatory collective licensing is appropriate also in the cross-border aspect. Then the last country in this category on the left side is Argentina, that we will talk about today. Argentina has a very comprehensive legislation. We're still digging through it to find the correct articles, but we've been in contact with Professor Delia Lipzig, and we've consulted her book on the topic. So Argentina has a representative mandate solution, And it works like this, that some societies of authors are vested by law with the right to represent all the creators of works they are responsible for. So this also includes non-members of those societies. So on a national level, the authority to represent is derived solely from the law. So based on this, it seems to be at least a legal presumption of representation, but it's still a bit unclear to us since we haven't found the detailed legislation and the decrees, if it could also be mandatory collective licensing. This is some of the things we are still working on researching about Argentina. And then what uses does the Argentinian system cover? The extension applies to works that fall within the scope of the CMOs who have a mandate by law. These could, for example, be the SADAIC for composers of music and Argentores for theater, film, radio, and television. So you have specific ones. When it comes to cross-border situations where there is some kind of representation agreement, it seems like the Argentinian CMOs act as a mandatory representative by contract and as a representative by the functioning of the law. So both here. And now we will move on to the countries on the other side of the slide here, to only a couple of them, not all still. And we will start with the top one, Australia. First of all, a bit about the system they have now. They have something called statutory licenses in certain cases, by some also known as legal licensing. This is a permission to make copies that is granted by law. So it means that the content can be used without permission as long as equitable remuneration is paid, and this is then paid to a CMO. And right holders cannot opt out of a statutory license. So in this way, it seems somewhat similar to a mandatory collective licensing, as we've been talking about. And in the Copyright Act, Part 5A and B, you find two examples for or two categories, maybe you could call, of licenses for educational purposes, and also for public organizations' use. But it has to be in an educational purpose. It cannot be a mixed purpose, some half private, half educational, like solely educational purpose. This is sometimes also referred to in Australia as the educational copying scheme. So the first one of these purposes that you can use for education is that it allows any copying and communication of text, images, and printed music. This is managed by the Copyright Society in Australia. The second one that it allows for is copying and communication of broadcasts. And this is made by a different organization. It's managed by Screen Rights, that is called. There are also a couple of other examples that we won't go in on here. And then when it comes to ECL in Australia, this has been considered, for instance, as a solution for orphan works. But when we were looking through it, we found some of the organizations being rather negative and recommending that this should not be a solution in Australia. But we have not been able yet to verify the situation, what it actually is now, and it will be interesting to see if the new UK implementation of ECL will impact on Australia's view on ECL. It will be interesting to see. Then we will look at Jamaica. We make a jump on the list. Very short about Jamaica. We haven't managed to get our hands on the proposal that is currently in Jamaica, because they have a proposal to implement some sort of ECL that we have found out about from secondary sources. From what we have found out until now, it seems that there is some that the CMOs will apply for permission, and they will apply to the Jamaican IP office, YIPO. And if the CMO wants to operate some kind of ECL scheme. And then they will be given a blanket license that works within a given class of rights. And there we have found out there are proposed some opt-outs, but we have not yet been able to find out what these are about. We haven't found the specifics of them yet, so we hope to find that. Then we move on to Japan. And Japan has considered the ECL solution and has been looking to the Nordic countries to see what's going on here and how it's done. And they have conducted a general study of ECL. But after this study, they found it necessary to conduct an examination of concrete cases, like in what uses would it actually be good to have it in the Japanese system? When will it work in the Japanese system? What is a good solution for us? So the Agency for Cultural Affairs will now choose some sectors they will look at to see how it would function. And as we have been told by contacts, this is expected to take some time. So this is probably not something, we will not have the results in our final results for the survey, but at least it's an ongoing project there in Japan that is interesting to follow. Very, very briefly about their current system, they have a compulsory licensing for orphan works in their Copyright Act. And this is issued by the Commissioner of the Agency for Cultural Affairs. And to get it, you need to prove that the author has been searched for. Since it's orphan work, you need to show that you have searched for the author with due diligence, and you need to deposit a compensation to the Commissioner of the agency. Very briefly. Then we have the Republic of Korea. Korea did study ECL openly about 10 years ago, from what we, or Jukka, can recall. We are still trying to find out where this has led. We haven't really found any proper traces of it yet in the research we've done until now. But what we have found out is they currently have something that they call statutory licensing. And this is for orphan works. It's the Article 50 of their Copyright Act. And the article reads that one may exploit the work by obtaining approval by the Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism as prescribed by presidential decree. So you find the details in the decree. But this is only on the condition that you must have made a considerable effort to find the author. You must indicate the intent of the use. Notice that it said exploit work in the law, so it's quite vague. You need to say what you intend to use it for, and the use must be licensed in compliance with the decree, so the details there. So as mentioned, exploit is quite wide, and you need to indicate the use. This is a bit different than the Australian. And a key element here is that the public authority authorizes the licenses if the requirements are met. And then we also have something about the EU, but that's been covered very extensively and excellently by our colleagues here today. So the main point here that in our research is some legislation acknowledges ECL in the member states, like the InfoSoc directives and others that have been mentioned here today. Secondly, the satellite and cable directive has some examples, for instance, of what we have called in our research a general ECL in Article 3.2. And also in 9, you find some mandatory collective management. And the third point of the EU law is the 2 new legislative proposals, where you can find the obliged to arrange for an extension effect and a mandatory collective licensing in the broadcasting regulation, very briefly. So this is still a work in progress. I've given you some examples that are different from the other in the panel, and this is still research we will continue. So stay tuned, and thank you for listening.